I had never imagined that a simple break away from my mobile home would turn into a nightmare. It all started when I decided to visit my family out of state for a couple of weeks. My mobile home, which I had painstakingly maintained and considered my sanctuary, was located just outside a community governed by a homeowners association, HOA, that I had no affiliation with. I had bought the land legally, had all the documents in place, and was under the impression that my property was safe. Little did I know that this assumption was about to be shattered by a woman I now refer to as HOA Karen, who apparently took it upon herself to enforce rules she had no right to enforce, on a property that did not even fall under her HOA's jurisdiction. The shock came when I returned home and found my mobile home missing. It wasn't just a prank or a misunderstanding. My home had literally been taken, moved, or impounded by the HOA without my knowledge or consent. I was overwhelmed with confusion and disbelief. How could this happen? Why had no one contacted me? And most importantly, how could an HOA claim authority over a property they didn't even have jurisdiction over? My attempts to get answers led me down a rabbit hole of HOA regulations, personal vendettas, and community politics. And that's when I learned that this wasn't just about rules but about power, control, and a single person's reckless sense of authority. HOA Karen, whose real name I learned later, was known in the neighboring community as someone who enforced rules with an iron fist, often beyond the scope of her actual powers. She had gained a reputation for being overbearing and confrontational, frequently escalating minor disputes into full-blown conflicts. But I had never had any interaction with her or her HOA because I was not part of their community. My property was on an adjacent plot, with all proper documentation proving ownership and residency outside their limits. Despite this, Karen took it upon herself to act as judge, jury, and executioner, ordering the removal of my mobile home while I was away, claiming it was in violation of her HOA's rules. The mobile home is not just a piece of property to me, it represents years of hard work, memories, and a sense of freedom. It was my retreat, a place I called home. Losing it suddenly and without any prior warning felt like a violation on a deeply personal level. It was devastating to come back and find my home gone, replaced by silence and confusion. My neighbors, some sympathetic and others wary, told me that HOA Karen had been pushing hard to clean up the area, and in the process, anyone deemed as an outsider or non-compliant became a target. I was suddenly an unwanted intruder in a place I had called home for years. What made the situation worse was the sheer illegality of the act. HOA Karen's association did not have any legal claim to my property. My ownership documents were clear, my taxes were paid, and I had all permits in place. Yet, Karen's HOA claimed that because my mobile home was parked near their community boundaries, it violated their aesthetic and zoning rules. This was an outright stretch of their authority and, in my view, a blatant abuse of power. Attempts to resolve the issue amicably were met with hostility, threats of fines, and even warnings of legal action against me if I didn't comply with their demands I was under no obligation to honor. The ordeal spiraled into a legal battle, one that drained me emotionally and financially. The HOA's aggressive tactics and refusal to acknowledge my property rights left me feeling powerless. But I was determined to fight back. With the help of a lawyer, I gathered all evidence, including land deeds, tax documents, and photographs, to prove that my mobile home was mine and that the HOA had no right to touch it. The case highlighted the often murky waters of HOA governance and how unchecked power can lead to abuses, especially against individuals who are vulnerable or unfamiliar with the law. Through this experience, I also learned about the importance of understanding local governance and community boundaries. HOAs can be beneficial for maintaining property values and community standards, but when their authority is taken too far, it can result in injustice and harm. My story became a cautionary tale shared by others who had faced similar challenges, reminding everyone to stay vigilant and know their rights, especially when dealing with powerful entities like HOAs. This is the story of how HOA Karen took my mobile home while I was out, and why standing up for my rights became the most important fight of my life. It's not just about a house, it's about justice, respect, and reclaiming what is rightfully mine. I want to start by explaining how I came to own my mobile home and why I'm not part of the HOA that ended up taking it from me. I purchased the mobile home several years ago, drawn by the affordability and the freedom it represented. Unlike a traditional house in a gated community, my mobile home was placed on a plot of land I legally owned just outside the boundaries of the HOA-managed neighborhood. When I bought the land, I made sure to get a thorough title search done, and the survey clearly showed my property was independent of the HOA's jurisdiction. It was a standalone piece of property, and I was responsible for its maintenance and taxes, which I diligently paid every year. When you buy a home inside an HOA community, you agree to abide by their rules, pay their fees, and accept their authority to enforce regulations. I never signed up for any of that. I deliberately chose to live outside their boundaries because I wanted to avoid the restrictions that HOAs often impose. Things like paint colors, landscaping rules, noise restrictions, and sometimes even limits on who can visit. I value my independence, and I like that my mobile home gave me that. I had neighbors on either side, some inside the HOA, some like me outside it, but I never felt threatened or conflicted because my ownership and residency were clear. Over the years, I developed a good relationship with most of my neighbors, including some inside the HOA. We'd share tips about local services, neighborhood safety, and community events. However, I was always aware that I wasn't part of their association. They had their meetings, fees, and covenants, which I was exempt from. That didn't mean we were completely separate. Often, community lines blur in suburban and rural areas, but legally the HOA had no right to interfere with my property. This distinction became critical when the conflict began. I had no idea that one member of the HOA, a woman later dubbed HOA Karen by the locals, had taken issue with my mobile home's proximity to the neighborhood. Karen was known for being particularly strict, often stepping beyond her official role as a board member or community volunteer to enforce rules aggressively. Over time, she had become notorious for pushing HOA regulations to their limits, sometimes ignoring legal boundaries and homeowner rights. To Karen, anyone outside the HOA's direct control was an inconvenience or a threat to the order she wanted to maintain. Despite my clear ownership and legal status, Karen viewed my mobile home as an eyesore or a violation of the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. She claimed that it lowered property values and didn't fit the community image she was trying to preserve. This was ironic because my property was not even in the HOA. It was literally outside the lines on the map. But that didn't stop her from trying to claim jurisdiction. This kind of overreach is rare but not unheard of, especially in places where HOA members have strong personalities and little accountability. Before the incident, I had a few minor run-ins with HOA representatives who tried to warn me about things like parking or trash disposal, but I always calmly explained my property was independent and asked for proof of their authority. No such proof was ever provided. These interactions were tense but manageable, until Karen took things into her own hands. Whether motivated by a personal grudge or a desire to assert control, she began organizing efforts to remove what she called unauthorized properties near the HOA, including mine. When I left town, I had no idea this battle was escalating behind my back. I assumed the HOA respected legal boundaries and property rights, but I was wrong. Karen mobilized the HOA's resources to take action, ignoring my ownership documents and the lack of any official complaint or violation filed against me. Her unilateral decision to have my mobile home removed was not only unjust but illegal. This breach of protocol and abuse of power would soon become the center of a larger conflict about property rights and HOA overreach, a fight I was forced to lead to reclaim my home and my peace of mind. The day I returned from my trip was supposed to be a joyous reunion with the place I call home. A place where I had countless memories, moments of peace, and the freedom to live life on my own terms. But instead, what I found was a shock so profound that it felt surreal. As I approached the spot where my mobile home had always been parked, I realized immediately something was very wrong. The entire space was empty. The home I had left just weeks ago was gone. My heart sank, and I stood there in disbelief, scanning the surrounding area as if my eyes were deceiving me. How could my mobile home just vanish? Was it stolen? Was it damaged? Who had the right to do this without informing me? I quickly learned from neighbors that the HOA had organized the removal of my mobile home while I was away. It was a cruel irony. I had never even been a member of their HOA and never agreed to their rules or fees, yet here I was, the victim of their actions. My neighbors seemed divided. Some were sympathetic, saying the HOA had gone too far, while others seemed resigned or even supportive of the HOA's heavy-handed approach. I felt isolated in my struggle, unsure of where to turn or who to trust. My first call was to the HOA office, hoping for a clear explanation or some proof of why and how they could remove my home. Instead, I was met with cold bureaucracy and evasive answers. They claimed that the mobile home was illegally parked and violated their community standards. When I pointed out that my property wasn't even in their jurisdiction, they shrugged and insisted it was a matter of community safety and aesthetics. It was baffling and infuriating. How could they ignore legal property boundaries and documentation? Why wasn't I given any notice or opportunity to resolve the matter? The experience left me feeling powerless. It was as if the rules that protect property owners didn't apply to me, and I was suddenly at the mercy of an organization that acted like a law unto itself. The mobile home was not just a building, it was my life's investment. The emotional weight of losing it abruptly without explanation was crushing. I was overwhelmed by anxiety and fear about what this meant for my future, my rights, and my ability to protect my property going forward. Frustrated and desperate, I began to reach out to legal counsel and local authorities. The police were sympathetic but said this was a civil matter between property owners and the HOA. The local government offices told me I needed to prove my ownership and challenge the HOA's actions in court. This was not the straightforward resolution I had hoped for. Meanwhile, the mobile home was gone, taken somewhere I didn't know, possibly damaged or even destroyed. The thought was unbearable. The community reaction was mixed. Some residents inside the HOA expressed regret over how things had unfolded, admitting that Karen's actions were excessive and damaging to the neighborhood's reputation. Others defended the HOA's right to maintain order and claimed that the mobile home was an eyesore that lowered their property values. This divided response made me realize how powerful community politics and personal vendettas can be when mixed with HOA authority. What I didn't realize at the time was that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. The battle to get my mobile home back, to assert my property rights, and to hold HOA Karen accountable would be exhausting and complex. It would require patience, perseverance, and a lot of legal muscle. But the one thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't let this injustice stand. Once I realized the gravity of the situation, I knew I had to take immediate legal action. The first step was consulting with a property lawyer who specialized in disputes involving HOAs. She listened carefully as I explained everything: how I owned the land legally, how I wasn't part of the HOA, and how my mobile home had been taken without any notice. The lawyer's expression shifted from polite interest to serious concern as she reviewed my documents. "This is a clear case of overreach and possible illegal seizure," she said. "You have every right to challenge this." We began the painstaking process of gathering all relevant paperwork: deeds, property surveys, tax receipts, photos of the mobile home in its rightful place, and communication logs. I realized how important documentation was, not just to prove ownership, but also to expose the HOA's disregard for legal boundaries. Meanwhile, I had to keep track of every interaction with the HOA Karen, and any third parties involved in removing or storing my mobile home. The HOA, of course, wasn't going to back down easily. Karen, empowered by her position, doubled down on her claims, arguing that the mobile home violated their community standards and needed to be removed for the greater good. Their legal team sent me intimidating letters threatening fines and additional legal action if I continued to contest their decision. At one point, they even suggested that since my mobile home was near their community, it could be subject to their jurisdiction under a loosely interpreted clause in their bylaws. This was a stretch, but it showed how far they were willing to push to justify their actions. The situation was emotionally draining. I spent countless hours on phone calls, meetings, and paperwork, all while trying to keep my day-to-day life running. The stress was overwhelming, but I knew I had to stay strong. Every delay or misstep could give the HOA an advantage. My lawyer prepared a formal lawsuit against the HOA for illegal seizure, property damage, and emotional distress caused by their actions. We sought a court order demanding the immediate return of my mobile home and compensation for the damages and suffering caused. Publicly, the case drew attention in our local community. News about the conflict between an independent homeowner and a powerful HOA spread, sparking debates on social media and at community meetings. Some people sympathized with my plight, seeing it as a fight against bullying and abuse of power. Others took the HOA's side, trusting that maintaining strict community standards was necessary. The story became a symbol of a larger issue: how unchecked HOA power can impact homeowners, sometimes unfairly and illegally. Throughout the legal battle, I gained insight into the complex relationship between homeowners and HOAs. HOAs are designed to protect property values and community standards, but when individuals use their authority beyond legal limits, it can lead to injustice and harm. It was clear that my case was not just about a mobile home, it was about defending the rights of property owners everywhere who could be vulnerable to similar abuses. Despite the challenges, I remained hopeful. The law was on my side and I was determined to reclaim what was mine. But the fight was far from over, and I soon discovered just how difficult it would be to stand up to a well-funded HOA with experienced lawyers and deep community ties. As the legal battle unfolded, the community around me became increasingly divided. What started as a personal fight to reclaim my mobile home soon sparked a broader debate about the power of HOAs and the rights of individual homeowners. Some neighbors, especially those within the HOA, saw the situation through the lens of community order and property values. To them, HOA Karen was a protector of standards, someone trying to maintain a clean, attractive neighborhood where everyone followed the same rules. They argued that my mobile home, which was different from the uniform houses nearby, disrupted the harmony and could potentially hurt home prices. On the other hand, many neighbors, both inside and outside the HOA, sympathized with me. They viewed the HOA's actions as an abuse of power, a heavy-handed overreach that violated basic rights. These neighbors expressed frustration with the lack of transparency, the absence of any notice before my home was removed, and the way HOA Karen seemed to have acted unilaterally without consulting other members. They recognized that while HOAs have a role, that role must have limits, especially when property ownership is clear and legal. Local community groups and online forums became battlegrounds for heated discussions. Posts and comments alternated between support for the HOA's tough stance on property standards and calls for fairness and due process for individual homeowners. Some neighbors shared their own stories of minor disputes with HOA rules, often involving fines or demands to change aspects of their homes. Many related to the frustration of living under strict HOA oversight, especially when it felt arbitrary or punitive. Amid the social media debates, HOA Karen remained a controversial figure. To her supporters, she was a necessary enforcer, the person keeping the neighborhood respectable and safe. To critics, she was an example of unchecked authority, someone who crossed boundaries to impose her will without accountability. Her reputation grew more polarized as the story gained traction, with some community members even calling for her resignation from the HOA board. This division impacted me deeply. I wasn't just fighting a legal battle, I was also navigating a social one. Friends I'd known for years were hesitant to take sides, fearing repercussions or social alienation. Others openly supported me, visiting, helping with legal advice, or simply offering words of encouragement. This mix of support and opposition created a tense atmosphere in the neighborhood, making it harder to find peace or closure. Despite the community tension, one thing became clear. The incident raised important questions about how HOAs operate and how much power they should have. My case was a wake-up call for many residents who had previously accepted HOA rules without question. It sparked discussions about homeowner rights, transparency in HOA decision-making, and the need for better checks and balances. The media attention that the case attracted added pressure on the HOA. Local news outlets picked up the story, highlighting the unusual nature of a homeowner losing their property to an HOA that had no jurisdiction. This public scrutiny forced the HOA board to respond publicly, but their statements remained vague, emphasizing community standards and safety without addressing the core issues of legality and ownership. Through all of this, I remained focused on my goal, getting my mobile home back and ensuring that no one else would have to face a similar injustice. The community's divided loyalties underscored how complicated and emotionally charged HOA disputes can be, especially when personal property and livelihoods are at stake. The ongoing battle with HOA Karen and the association took a tremendous emotional toll on me. Losing my mobile home wasn't just a financial setback, it felt like a personal violation. My home represented my independence, my memories, and the hard work I had poured into maintaining it. Suddenly, all of that was ripped away without warning, leaving me feeling vulnerable and powerless. Every day brought stress and anxiety as I worried about what would happen next. Whether I would get my home back, how much damage had been done to it, and what the future held. Sleep became elusive as my mind raced with worries. The uncertainty of the legal process and the hostility from the HOA added to my stress. I felt isolated at times, as if I were fighting an uphill battle against an institution that seemed to have endless resources and support. The confrontations with HOA representatives, especially Karen, left me emotionally drained. Their dismissive attitude and refusal to acknowledge the legality of my ownership made me question if justice was truly attainable. Friends and family tried to support me, but many couldn't fully understand the depth of the impact. To outsiders, it might seem like just a property dispute, but for me it was deeply personal. The mobile home was where I found peace after long days, where I celebrated milestones, and where I built my sense of security. The loss triggered feelings of grief, anger, and frustration, often overwhelming me. The social strain within my neighborhood also weighed heavily on me. Being at odds with some neighbors and knowing that others were hesitant to openly support me created a sense of loneliness. The community tensions made everyday interactions uncomfortable. What used to be friendly waves and casual conversations became strained encounters filled with unspoken judgments or avoidance. Despite these challenges, the experience also revealed the resilience I didn't know I had. The injustice fueled my determination to fight back. I sought therapy and leaned on close friends to help process the emotional burden. Each step in the legal battle, though stressful, was a step toward reclaiming my dignity and property. I realized that standing up for my rights wasn't just about the mobile home, it was about protecting my sense of self and fairness. The ordeal also opened my eyes to how power dynamics play out in communities governed by HOAs. It showed me how individuals like Karen, armed with authority but lacking accountability, can inflict real harm. This awareness strengthened my resolve to advocate not just for myself but for others who might find themselves in similar situations. Looking back, I understand that the emotional toll was one of the hardest parts of this fight. It's easy to underestimate how deeply property disputes can affect a person's mental health and well-being. But through the support I received and my own inner strength, I managed to keep going. The experience reshaped my understanding of community, justice, and the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. After months of frustration and legal wrangling, a significant turning point came when we uncovered new evidence that would strengthen my case considerably. My lawyer and I discovered a series of internal HOA communications and emails, inadvertently leaked during the discovery phase of the lawsuit. These documents revealed that HOA Karen and some board members had been actively discussing my property well before the removal of my mobile home. More troublingly, the emails showed clear intent to bypass legal procedures and proceed with the removal without proper notice or due process. This revelation was a game-changer. The HOA's position that they acted within their rights suddenly looked less like an enforcement of community standards and more like a calculated abuse of power. It became clear that HOA Karen had pushed for a swift, unilateral decision to remove my home, disregarding both my rights as a property owner and the boundaries of the HOA's jurisdiction. These documents exposed a premeditated effort to target me, not based on any genuine community concern but seemingly driven by personal animosity or a desire to assert control. The legal strategy shifted to focus heavily on these communications, using them as evidence of bad faith and illegal conduct. The case moved from a mere property dispute into one involving ethical breaches and potential civil rights violations. My lawyer emphasized how this could influence the judge's view of the HOA's credibility and the legitimacy of their actions. Alongside the legal breakthrough, community support began to grow stronger. Neighbors who had been hesitant to speak out started to voice their concerns publicly after seeing the evidence. Some HOA members distanced themselves from Karen's aggressive tactics, and local advocacy groups offered assistance. The story gained further traction in local media, painting a clearer picture of the HOA's misconduct rather than just presenting a two-sided dispute. This shift in momentum boosted my spirits immensely. For the first time in months, I felt a real chance of reclaiming my home and restoring justice. The support from others, combined with solid legal grounds, was a powerful reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. It also underscored the importance of transparency and accountability within HOAs, highlighting how unchecked power can be challenged through persistence and evidence. Though the path ahead was still challenging, this turning point marked a critical step forward. It renewed my hope and determination to see the case through to a fair resolution. The experience reinforced a vital lesson. In battles against powerful entities, knowledge, documentation, and community support can be the keys to overcoming injustice. After months of court hearings, negotiations, and mounting public pressure, the situation finally began to move toward resolution. The evidence we presented was undeniable, and the judge recognized the overreach by the HOA and the unlawful removal of my mobile home. The court ruled in my favor, ordering the immediate return of my property and awarding damages for the emotional distress and financial losses I had suffered. It was a long-awaited victory, but it came with mixed feelings. Getting my mobile home back was more than just reclaiming a piece of property, it was reclaiming my dignity and rights as a homeowner. The process of having it transported back to my land was complicated and costly, and unfortunately, the home had suffered some damage during the removal and storage. Repairs were necessary and the financial strain was still significant. But the most important thing was that justice had been acknowledged, and the HOA's actions had been officially condemned. The ruling also sent a strong message to the HOA and other similar organizations about the limits of their power. It reinforced that they cannot act beyond their legal authority or ignore due process. HOA Karen faced consequences as well, losing her position on the board and being held responsible for some of the damages. Her aggressive tactics were exposed, and the community began the work of healing from the division she had caused. The community atmosphere slowly improved. The HOA board restructured with new leadership focused on transparency, communication, and respect for all property owners, regardless of HOA membership. Neighbors started rebuilding trust, and the focus shifted back to cooperation rather than conflict. I found that many who had initially supported the HOA's actions were now more cautious about blind acceptance of HOA authority. Personally, the experience left me more vigilant and empowered. I became involved in local advocacy efforts to educate homeowners about their rights and how to protect themselves from similar abuses. I shared my story openly to raise awareness about the potential pitfalls of living near or under HOA jurisdiction and the importance of standing up for property rights. While the battle was arduous, the resolution reaffirmed my belief in justice and the importance of fighting unfair treatment. It was a hard lesson in resilience and the power of persistence, showing that even in the face of powerful organizations, individuals can prevail. Reflecting on this whole ordeal, I realize how important it is for every homeowner to understand their rights and the limits of HOA authority. Before this incident, I thought I was well-informed and careful, but facing an aggressive HOA like Karen's made me aware of how easily even lawful owners can be targeted. The experience taught me the value of thorough documentation, knowing your property boundaries clearly, and being prepared to stand up when those boundaries are threatened. I also learned that HOAs, while designed to protect communities, can sometimes become sources of conflict and injustice if their power goes unchecked. It's crucial for communities to have transparent processes and accountable leadership to prevent situations like mine. This is something I now actively advocate for, encouraging better regulation and oversight of HOAs at local and state levels to protect homeowners from abuse. On a personal level, I've grown stronger and more resilient. This challenge tested me in ways I never imagined but also showed me the importance of community support, legal knowledge, and perseverance. I'm grateful for those who stood by me, from my lawyer to neighbors who offered encouragement and advice. Their support was invaluable and reminded me that even in tough times, no one has to fight alone. Moving forward, I'm focused on rebuilding and protecting my home, literally and figuratively. I'm more cautious but also more empowered. The fight has inspired me to get involved in local housing advocacy, so others don't have to suffer similar injustices. I want to help create communities where respect for property rights and fairness is the norm, not the exception. While the scars from this experience remain, they serve as a reminder of what I endured and overcame. I hope my story encourages others facing HOA conflicts to stand firm, seek support, and never give up. After all, a home is more than just a place. It's a symbol of security, dignity, and the right to live free from unfair interference. My journey was tough, but it reaffirmed that justice, though sometimes slow, can prevail with determination and courage.